Router power! Welcome back to Pushing Technology to the Limit. Are you feeling today that your network and your internet is just going so damn slow? Well, I got a few suggestions for you to help you fix your networking problems. Now, in the back of me, I've got 5 routers, and they're all working perfectly. Now, today I'm going to help you build your own router. That's what I mean by router power, is that you can make a very nice router cheaply. And all you need is a few parts to do this. And if you're new at computing, networking, this is going to be a little more advanced for you, but I'm going to try to make it so that you can learn something from it. And it's really not all that hard to do this for anybody. I mean, I know there's some users out there that are watching this and going to say, well, I don't care about doing that. I just want to buy one. Well, I have purchased routers too, but I can tell you for one that the ones that I've built work better. And I'm using the circuit board routers, but I also have made the PC routers. Let me show you what I've got going on behind me here. First off, I got my modems. And as you can see, I got 3 modems. Down here, I have, well, it's a little bit hard to see, but I have my load balancing router. Let me point it to you here. It's this one right here. Then I have my other router, which is a business router. And then on top of my switches, I have a PC router. So if you've seen my other videos in the past, this is what this is. But if you're new and you've never seen my videos, this is what I'm going to be talking about today, is PC routers. So over here on my right hand side, I've got another set of routers. And I'm going to get into discussing what these are all doing and why I have so many of them. Now, there's 2 types of, you can do. You can either do laptops or you can do towers. Now, my laptop here is a backup one. This one over here is not. It's just a one I use all the time. But I am actually in the process right now of fixing the other tower that sits right here. Today I'm also going to be talking about the pros and cons of these routers versus circuit board routers. Now, everything has pros and cons, whether you're looking at a PC router or a circuit board router. Now, there's different kinds of circuit board routers. There's home routers and there's business routers. Now, if you are a home user and you've got tons of stuff, whether it's, you've got one of those smart TVs, computers, smartphones, tablets, and all your kids are on it, whether you got 2, 3, 4 kids, and plus yourselves that are using the internet, you could be maxing out your router. And especially for home users. Now, I do not recommend using your modem as a router, even though it is able to do routing. My modems are not routers anymore. I put them in the bridge mode to use my existing routers with the modems. So, what's needed in building one of these PC routers? Well, let me show you what I've got right now. So here is my tower that I am working on to repair. And I'm going to show you the inside of this thing now so I can tell you what you need to do. So a long time ago, I basically stripped this machine and rebuilt it. You don't need a very powerful computer. This is probably, well, it's not the oldest. It's 2 gigahertz. But let me show you what I've done. Is that these cards right here, there's about 3 cards, so there's 3 networking cards in here. And so there's the original one, so there's 4. Let me show you the back of this thing now. Now it's a little bit hard to see, but right here is my first network card. And then here's the other cards that I have. I've got one Ethernet cable plugged in, but then there's 2 other cards after that. And this is actually going to be my main router for bringing in internet. And I'll explain more later on what's going on with this particular PC. So here, I've got the CD-ROM drive. The hard drives are in here. A little bit hard to see. It's one right here. This is an old floppy drive that no longer is in use. So what is needed to make a router? Now it depends on what kind of router you want. There's filter routers. There's just regular routers. I've got a couple of them that I've used, one I like better, but there's still positives and negatives about the one that I'm using. So what you need to do first is get a tower. Now, let me just talk about the computer aspect of things. Like I talked to you about earlier, that there's towers and then there's laptops. Now, with the laptops, that's actually the first thing I used in my system was laptops. I didn't have towers back then, but people were giving me used laptops. And I used IP-COP and ZeroShell on these laptops for years. They still work today, but I quit using them for one reason. They go through a lot of power supplies. Now, the one that I showed you that I'm still using as one of my main routers, I've never had a problem with it. It just keeps running. The power supply works. But a lot of these other computers that I've had, well, of course, I've replaced the power supply. And I didn't have one to start with, so... but one of the failures with a laptop is that you have power supply failures. Now, there's also hard drive failures. And that's what's wrong with the system that's in behind me here, is that it had a hard drive failure. So I'm replacing the hard drive now. But with the laptops, you only got one network card. Now, you can use USB cards. And I also can tell you that they're not as good as a physical hardware, right, built inside your tower. Of course, you can't get multiple network cards for a laptop. Too bad you couldn't, but they're not meant for servers or routers. Now, I've used dual-core computers. I've used single-core computers. And I can tell you that the dual-core has more power than the single-core computers. Now, I can also say that the single cores do me just fine. I'm not in a hurry. There's, like, what I do is I have VLANs, which is Virtual Local Area Network. Now, these are for management switches. Most of you folks that are at home don't have this, but I do. Now, if you watch my other videos, you will see what I'm talking about. I'm not going to go into that today. So, when you start building these things, you need to, I don't know about 1 gigahertz, but the computers that I use are about 2 to 3 gigahertz. And, of course, the one that's behind me is about, 2 gigahertz, and it's a Pentium 4 processor. Now, I know a lot of you are not going to understand what I'm talking about because you're new at this, but for us advanced users, know what all that stuff is. But all you need to understand is that a Pentium 4 will do you just fine. And dual core will do you better. And speaking of power, now there's a difference between a single core laptop versus a single core tower, like what I've got over here behind me. that has more power than a single core laptop. So when it comes to internet, you really don't need a very powerful computer. You don't need to have dual core computer. You can, but that's a little bit overkill. Now the hard drive's specifications, I've used 80 gigabytes. Now that is still overkill. The biggest one I've seen is 4 gigabytes. And I'll tell you, it's a waste of money to buy a terabyte hard drive for a computer that you're only going to use like, the ones that I've been using, I've only been using 30 megabits. So, it's not worth it. But these days, it's really getting hard to find an 80 gig hard drive. I know you can't find a 20. I mean, maybe used. But there again, I don't recommend used, parts in like a hard drive for a computer. If you're going to do something, buy it brand new. The motherboard can be old, but make sure that you've got a new hard drive. I mean, you can use the one that's with it, but when it dies, it's going to cause you all sorts of hell in your network. And you'll wonder what's going on. And you're going to have to just reload it. Now, if you're new to installing Windows, routers, yeah, it's pretty easy. And it looks kind of complicated, but not really once you get used to it. For many of us that have been repairing our own computers, and I'll be honest, it was very confusing to me at first because it wasn't like a Windows system where I just go in and just tell it, put C here and then start installing. So I'm going to get that into a little bit later in the video about how to install these routers. I won't take an awful lot of time because it'll kind of bore those that are not interested. So I won't go through the whole process, but I'll just show you the little steps that I have to take while it goes into it. Now, it's not nearly as long as Windows has to take to install. The one thing I have found that is really kind of a drawback to the laptop routers is that the monitor doesn't shut off. Now, with a desktop router, you don't need a monitor. And that's one thing about the computers is that once you get it installed, you can basically just shut off your keyboard and your monitor. And in fact, you can just unplug it because you don't need it. Now, there's sometimes certain routers, like the ones that I've showed you, like the Zero Shell, you can do a lot of stuff right on the keyboard and monitor. And you don't need a mouse because there's no graphical user interface. That's what GUI stands for. Graphical User Interface. Now, a lot of people go around and say, well, now this has GUI, and when the first time I heard that, I didn't know what the heck it meant. So when you hear or read about GUI, that just means Graphical User Interface. Now, when you are getting ready to build your computer and you're ordering parts for your system, the one thing I do recommend is when you're buying a network card, I would use separate brands. So like this computer back here has Linksys, D-Link, and I can't remember if it's TP-Link or TrendNet network card. Now the reason why I say to do that is because when you get into your operating system of your router to configure each network card, they're going to have brand names labeled. And to identify which card is which, whether you got one for, like, the filter routers, for example, they've got 4 different cards. So they've got red, they've got green, blue, and orange. Now, each router brand or manufacturer, whatever you want to call it, of the operating system, is going to use a different color. But for the IP cop, those are the colors. It's red, green, blue, and orange. And then for Smoothwall, it is red, green, purple, and orange. So it just varies. And I'm going to go through each router that I have. Now, I can definitely tell you the pros and cons of IP cop. The pros is that it blocks things on your internet, and it cleans it up, so it doesn't zero shell. But the one thing I've found that is very difficult with the IP cop is that it's set it and forget it. If you need to make a network change, like you need to change your IP address, or if you just need to reconfigure your network, like I had to a while back, I changed all my IP addresses in my network because I was trying to figure out what the heck was going on in my network, if it was a network conflict or what with another network. But the Smoothwall does. It allows you to change every IP address on your network card. Now that is flexible. I started using Smoothwall because it would reinstall easily. Now IP cop, I had a hell of a time getting that reinstalled when it would break down, even if there wasn't a problem. And I even had sometimes where the operating system just stopped working for I don't know what reason. It was working fine, and one day it come on and boom, no internet. And then I come down to the control room and looked at my screen and rebooted it, and it said, missing boot file or something like that. So, IP cop works for a while. Now, I don't know if it's because of a hardware failure or what it is, but I've had this IP cop for 3 years. I like it and I don't like it. Now, with Smoothwall, I can't really make a judgment call just yet, whether if I like it or not, because I had these problems with my hardware, so I can't tell if it was a hardware issue or if it is a software issue. So, one of the things that I would do if you were interested in filtering your network is decide what you want to use first. And when I did my research, the IP cop was a little bit harder to set up than the Smoothwall. And there again, the Smoothwall had a help file, the IP cop didn't. If you're wondering why I have so many routers, it's because they do different things. So let me explain to you why I have so many different routers in my network. Now, this is not your typical setup, like I've said before. But for me, and I'll explain why that there's different ones. So let me get to that now. I know it's a little bit hard to see here, but there's this TP-Link load balancing router. Now, why do I have this? Well, the reason why I have this is that it takes 3 of my DSL modems and makes one connection. Now, this takes everything, so it makes about 20 megabytes down and 3 megabits up. And now this router, and the reason why I have this now, the only reason why I have this, is for QoS, which means quality of service. And I'll explain that to you right now, what I'm doing with it. So I get 20 megabytes down. Well, I tell each machine in my network that they can only have, say, like 6 megabytes. And that's good enough for streaming video, uploading, downloading. And I don't really even let them have my full upload speed. So I give them about a megabyte up. And the rest of it is for backbone. And then this laptop is for non-filtered use. So like for my phones, my web TV, that all comes under non-filtered because I don't need to filter those particular devices on my network. And the other thing is, I use it for activating different things on my network that the filter router blocks. Now the reason why I have that set up like that is because I don't want to have certain things updating on my network that I don't want to be updated, and that they're just trying to force you to get to something new. So I block those updates. So it has to be approved before I allow the system to upgrade. Now if you're wondering why I have a QoS router installed, is because the Zero Shell has a drawback. It doesn't do quality of service like the expensive router does. So basically, all I'm using for that Netgear router is just the service of the internet. And that goes for routers, other computers. So like my Zero Shell router, I have a ton of computers on there. And all those computers that are on that Zero Shell router are at the 6 megs and 1 megabyte up. And I do that for most of all my computers, whether it's on that router or another router. And the QoS stinks on the Zero Shell. I've tried to set it up. Maybe you can set it up, but I found it most difficult. It was easier just to use another router to do the quality of service control on it than it was to try to get that thing to work. And the other reason is I use the Zero Shell for VLANing, which is Virtual Local Area Networks. Now, like I said, this is going to be more than what most people want to do. If you have a small business, you probably want to do VLANs. For most home users, they don't need all that nonsense. But for me, I'm an advanced home user, and I need those. And when you get the amount of stuff that I've got running down here, you need to separate your networks. The one thing I found out is if you use everything, I had problems with 25 to 30 devices on one network, which is like 192.168.1.1, and I was having a horrible time transferring video files from one machine to another. Well, with this way I've got it set up with different networks, the transfers go a lot faster. So let me start showing you how to install one of these things on a computer. And the one thing I forgot to tell you folks about is before you get started, now these operating systems are downloadable on the internet. And all you have to do is type in IPCOP, Smoothwall, or Zero Shell. Now, the other things I do recommend for you folks to do, now a lot of you may not have this, some of you do, but if you don't, well, what it is called Virtual PC. Now that's a software, but then there's VirtualBox, and what they do is that they are simulating a computer. Now, there's only one way to tell if these operating systems work is to test it in a virtual mode first. Now, a lot of you, that's going to be more advanced, but for some folks, you really need to do that. Because you also need some kind of burning software. Like Nero. There's other ones out there that will burn an ISO. Now, don't ask me what an ISO is, but that's basically the image file that you need to download. And it will look funny on your computer. And then once you burn the disk, it will say whatever it needs to say, whether it's IPCOP, Smoothwall, or Zero Shell. And the only way to tell if it works, before you waste a disk, is to test it in a virtual state. And then you can get an idea of how everything works before you actually try to install it on a computer. So, once you get on your computer, now you may have to look that up to find out how to boot your CD-ROM drive. Now, some are set up by default to just boot an operating system, whether it's Windows or it's Linux, and then start running that. So, if it doesn't, you need to push either F2 or F12, escape, or delete. Now, there are different brand computers are going to have it set up differently. Some are shown, some are not. So you got to look up how to boot that particular system on the internet if it doesn't tell you on your screen when you first turn it on. So once you have your disk made, you can put that into your CD-ROM drive. And the other thing, once you get done installing the operating system, I would shut off the internal drive. Because I'll tell you what, just leaving your computer running 24 hours a day, will wear out the CD-ROM drive, even though you're not using it. Just having it run will cause issues if that thing starts dying on you. And I know that's one thing with laptops you can't do. You just can't unplug the CD-ROM drive. And that's just the way it goes. So let me start showing you how this thing installs. And then we'll do a little configuration thing on my computer. And then we'll go from there. Now I'm going to be recording this off my computer monitor. So it may be a little bit hard to read. I don't know. But I'll try to read everything to you, so if you can't see it too clearly, that I'll be reading it to you. So when you hit your F12 key, or whatever button it may be, mine is F12, it says onboard or USB CD-ROM drive. So that's what I want to boot to. So you hit return. Oops. Well, it would help if you put the CD in, for crying out loud. Anyways, now I've got to hit the F. Let's see here. F1 to retry. Okay. So now this screen shows up, and this is actually the Zero shell that I'm going to be installing on my computer. And it says, it gives you a list of options. So it says 1, normal startup. 2, increased versatility, if I'm saying that right. 3, without ACPI, I don't know what that means. Without, and 4 is without APCI. Don't know why they have that twice. And then number 5 is enable. Let's see here. Let me get a better shot of the screen here. Enable. Oh, what's it doing now? Well. Oh. Let me. I don't know what it's trying to do. But let me restart the computer. I'm trying to read it all to you, and I can't do it. So number 5 was, let's see here, enable IRQ polling mode, which who knows what that means. So you want number 1, normal startup, and then you hit 1, then return. So now this will boot to the disk first. Then you have to install it after that. So it's going to go through its stuff of booting up, and over here it tells you that, you know, everything is okay as it's loading. Now I'm only starting with Zero Shell first, is because that's the one that most people are going to want. You're going to want to have a good router. This way you don't even have to buy one. Now the comparison between the routers, whether it's a laptop or it's a desktop, the only difference is that it's the speed, it's the availability for, you know, like USB ports, you know, and its power. A laptop runs, I think, about 24 watts for the power supply, and one of these desktops here that I have has, like this one right here, runs about 100 watts versus the laptop. So that's the difference in power consumption. But these have more power. Now the one thing that I have to say about this computer is that it does boot up slower when it's loading the disk. So that's one thing about, you know, slower computers. But once it gets installed, what does it matter? Now, one thing I forgot to mention is you might have to start with a fresh hard drive. Now what I mean by that is that you need to remove all partitions on your hard drive. Whether if you got, you know, C, D, E, F, G. Most computers have just one partition on the drive. So what you're going to need to do is either A, take the hard drive out of the computer, put it into a cradle, and plug it into a Windows system and then delete the partition from there. And that's a whole nother advanced thing that I really can't get into, but there's a partition program inside of every Windows, whether it's Windows XP, whether it's Vista 7, 8, 10. There's all just a partitioning program in there. I can't get into all that, like I said, because each machine is going to be different. But what you need to do is wipe off whatever you've had previously. Now, especially like I had a Linux operating system on this before. So what I need to do, and that's why I had a problem just a few minutes ago, is that it just can't install another program without having a clean slate. So that's what I'm basically doing here right now, is I put a Windows disk in, and I am getting rid of the partitions that are in the computer. Sometimes you gotta format it. I've even had that issue. Now I don't know if it's because of the computer or the hard drive. I don't know. But when you do run across problems like I am right now, you need to take some other steps, like cleaning off the hard drive. So I forgot to tell you that earlier, and because I've really never had that issue, but in times past I've had to kind of do it. But it just depends on the computer, because I had different computers I haven't had to do this a total wipeout of the hard drive, but certain machines I do. So that's what I'm working on right now, is I'm going to remove the partition and then reinstall the Linux operating system. While the computer is redoing its process with my Zero Shell router, the one thing I should tell you about is that there's different computers out there now. The older ones are 32-bit, the newer ones are 64-bit. I've installed these operating systems on both 32-bit and 64-bit without a problem. Now, if you run across a problem, I'm not really sure how to help you solve that problem. A lot of the newer operating systems now are flexible with 64-bit and 32-bit. And the 64 bits have more flexibility than the 32 bits do. Like if you need more RAM, which I don't know why you would. I am using 1 gigabyte of RAM in my towers, and I've had 1 gigabyte of RAM in my laptops. And actually the one that I showed you that's running, it's only 512 megabytes of RAM, which is not much, but it still works fine. Okay, after a few minutes, I got this thing up and running, so we're ready to install this thing. But first, I want to show you what the rest of the screen has to say on it, if you can't read it already. Up here in the left-hand corner, it's telling me the host name, which is zeroshell.example.com. The CPU is 1, Intel R, Pentium R, 4, 2.80 gigahertz, and then it says something about megahertz, which I don't care. Over here it tells you the memory, which is about 2 gigabytes of RAM. I don't know why they read it in kilobytes, but that's what it just says. And it gives you the uptime and the load profile, which is what we're going to need to make when we get into the router. And over here on the right hand side of the screen, it shows you the default IP address and the username and password, which is Zero Shell. So now all we have to do is just start installing this thing, and once it's done installing, you've really got to reboot the system to get the CD out. I don't know why that is. It just, I guess because it's somehow locked in there because the operating system's running. I have no idea. So I just hit A, and then it gives me, some things here down here at the bottom. It tells me the hard drive, which is 160 gigabytes. Let me get down here close to the screen. 160 gigabytes. Now, like I said, this is too big for this computer. But I couldn't really find another 80 gigabyte hard drive. So now it gives you some instructions to install it. So it says select the device where you want to install Zero Shell. 1 would be your first hard drive, or 0 is exit, which we want 1. So I'm going to hit 1 and then enter. So now it just gives you a warning, as everything does. It just says that this is going to destroy all data on the disk, and it says yes or no, and you gotta type the full yes in. You just can't put Y. So I did yes, and now it's asking me if it wants Bootstrap, which I don't know anything about. Whether it wants to be console, Vega or Serial. I just go with the default, which is Vega. Don't know what that really means. And then it says kernel parameters, null, no, quiet, and I just keep hitting return in all this. I really don't understand too much about what it's doing. So now it says that it's installing the operating system. So that's going to take a few minutes to do, to finally get that up and running, which doesn't take very long, but it's just a little bit of a process here. Once it gets installed, then you can continue to configure your router from your monitor and keyboard, or you can go to a web browser on your computer to do the final configurations. Now, I do recommend using a profile, which is the ones that I do all the time, and they're nice because if something happens, or you want to do a reconfiguration, or you want to do a test, and you don't want to mess up your current configuration on your router, you can always make another one and then reboot the system. Well, now it is ready to run, so all you have to do is hit the return button, or any key, and now it's ready. But see, when I come over here to my computer, I just cannot easily eject this because it won't let it come out because it's still in operation. So what I do is I tell it to reboot, which is R, and then it says, are you sure? And this one you can type Y or N right here up on the screen. Can't see it down where I had the camera. So all I have to do is just hit that, yes, and enter, and now it's just going to reboot the system. So I hit F12 so I can actually stop the process, and then I can eject the system. So now I can eject the disk from the system here. Now is the time to see if this operating system successfully installed or not. So we'll see if it boots up, and if it does, then you're finished. But if not, and it says an error of some sort, then we have to go back and reinstall it. So now here it's booting up the operating system. Like I said, it'll be slower on some machines, and this is a slower machine, so it's going to take a little bit to get it going. But other than that, once it's going, it's fine. And just make sure that all the things are on OK. And there you go. Now you can get inside your computer. And now you can configure VLANs or what have you. So here we are on my workstation with the router window open. Now this is not quite open just yet. Now I made a profile by default. Now when you first load this operating system, there will be no profile. But I made one so that I'm all set. But the default address, now I left it the default address. So the default address is up here. Not sure if you can see it or not. But it's 192.168.0.75. And I've got my own username and password now. Well, actually not username, but so what you do is, well, when when you finally get your router running, you're going to have this display window in Firefox or Internet Explorer, whatever browser you're using on your PC. So you just go to Advanced on Firefox and tell it to add the exception right here. So right there's my button where it says add, exception. So then it will further to tell you, to confirm your thing, and I said okay. And here's my, alright. Let's see here. So I gotta type Zero Shell, because I've already had this in there already. So I've set this up on another system. So this is your default page, and it's gonna just say that there is no internet. And when that red is green, then you've got internet. So basically, what you do is right up at the top here, you've got your setup, packages, profiles, network, and time. So what we want to do is go to profiles and click on that. So basically, when you first get in here, there is no profiles, but like I said, I've already created one by default so that I can always reset the system if I have to, or if I need to do another reconfiguration. What you'd have to do is put your format your hard drive, and like I labeled mine save, and like I said, I don't need 160 gigabytes of space, but that's the hard drive I have in this system, so that's what I'm going to work with. So when you click on network button, it gives you the list of your connections. So like Ethernet 0 is my network connection for the router. It's not the internet. Now I got two other, let's see here. There's actually 4 cards in this computer. So I can set them up for different networks, or I can use them for internet. So this also can be used as a load balancing router. And I never set it up that way because I already have one. And I could, but if you want to do more advanced setups on your network, like I have, you can do VLANs, which, like I said, VLANs is a whole different thing. But right now I don't really want to get into that. I want to get into my other router setups, so you can see how to install these without too much confusion here. Now, if you're looking for a basic router that can hold up to more than just 4 computers like a home router, this one will do just fine for you. I mean, if you had wireless in your tower, whether it's whatever desktop tower you have, or you have a laptop, now you can utilize the laptop Wi-Fi card for Wi-Fi in your network, which is a good thing. But like I said, I don't really recommend laptops because they're fail on you than a regular tower. So all you have to do to get internet on your Zero Shell router is use the DHCP. And I still have the window open. I wanted to talk about this before I actually get going to the other routers, just to get internet to your system. So let me show you that now. Now, the one thing I forgot to mention about this system is you cannot just plug another computer into this router. If you're going to do that, you're going to need to have a crossover cable, because this is not a physical router like you would expect from a circuit board router. A circuit board router is going to allow you to plug in anything, switches, computers, other networking devices, but with a laptop or a desktop tower router, it's not going to be as well. I mean, who's going to want to just plug their router in that's a PC directly into their other computer without some other networking power, like switches, like I've got. So all you have to do is select one of your cards here. Gotta get my mouse here. And you can scroll down to whichever one you want to use. And if there was connection, all you have to do is hit this one button that says DYN IP. That means dynamic IP. So, like I said, if there was a connection to that card, you could just tell it enabled, and then you have your other router connected, that whether it's a router or it's a modem / router combination, to this computer. Now, if you're going to use 192.168.1.1, if that's your master router and this router is the same address, except that if it's .2 or .3, you're going to need to change your master router that brings in your internet to whatever address, whether it's 192.100.100.100. That way you can fool your zero shell router to thinking that it's another piece of equipment. Well, it is, but it can't see. It won't pick up internet if your internet is coming from the 192.168.1.1 network. It just will not do it. If it sees itself, it will shut off. But if you change the address, which I can't get into doing that because each router is different, but it's very easy to do. Just look up your manufacturer on the internet and then ask the question how to change the IP address. And it's very simple. So let me get to the other routers now and showing you how to get those installed. Now I'm going to show you how to install the IP cop. And the IP cop and Smoothwall are basically the same setups. But I'm going to go through both of them just to show you, because there's one extra setup in the Smoothwall that IP cop does not have. Now, the one thing I recommend that you do before starting anything with this is to have all of your Ethernet cables plugged in to your switch. Now, if you don't have a switch, plug whatever you're going to use with a crossover cable into this computer and plug it into your workstation systems. And on this computer, there will be one internet in, and then there will be green for your main network, blue is for your Wi-Fi, and orange is for your server. So I'm going to set up most of those today, and the other reason why you want to have them plugged in all in at once is because once you turn this computer on, if there's not a connection to the Ethernet card, the computer won't even recognize that it's even running. So you would have to reboot the system and have all your Ethernet cards running through your switch or for another cable with the crossover. So basically the IP cop is going to be installed the same way as I did the Zero Shell, but it's going to be a little bit different as far as the way it looks. So let me get to that now. So my computer's booted up, and I'm going to select the first option, which is onboard CD-ROM. Now it's going to show you this thing, give you some text options, whether you want to press return to boot IP cop 2.1 by default installation, or press F1 for help. Don't need help, just going to hit the return. Okay, so if you are English, just hit enter, enter. Now if you're in the U.S. or whatever country you are, you select your country. So that's that, and then my time zone, which would be Eastern Standard Time. And I'm not really even going to mess with the clock. Don't care. So now it looks for the hardware. It says that I've got a Western Digital 160 gigabyte hard drive. And I'll ask you if you want to go back. I'm going to say proceed. Hard disk. And now it's going to partition the hard drive. And that will take some time to complete. And I'll be back when the next steps are going to be taken. Okay. Now it's going to want to ask you if you want to restore it from a previous version. I don't have anything. So I'm just going to go to skip. Now the thing is basically done with its installation. It's basically telling you that you need to point your browser at https://192.168.1.1:8443. Or it can be whatever your settings are. I mean, if it's a different IP address, then that's the one that you'll use. So if you got 192.168.34.1, that's the one that you'd use. So then when you just go to continue, the disk ejects, and you can leave this alone, or you can do whatever you want with it. You can make like a test. So I made this one test router. So I made a Pushing Tech domain name. I'm going to hit OK. Now this is the tricky part, is the red interface, which this is the internet. If you make a boo-boo and you can't get back in, you're going to have to reinstall the whole thing. I know that's a pain in the ass, but that's the way this machine works. And that's one of the reasons why I don't really like it, because it took me forever to do it. But I use static to do it. And see, this is the problem that I don't like, is the fact with IP-COP, if you have whatever it is, a router or a modem, and if it fails and you forget what your IP address is, then you got to reinstall IP-COP, which is really a pain. But normally you don't have to do that. Alright. So now is your network card assignment. So you can see here the different things here that I've got installed. So each one is going to be a different, for one's going to be for your internet, another one's going to be for your existing network. So let's see here. What do I want? I guess we'll just, well, I'll just do it. I'll just go down for the list. There. So here is your network card assignments, and I've got them all listed now, and they are set to go. And for some reason I have two Realtek cards. I don't know why it says Realtek, because they're two different brands. I have a TP-Link and a TrendNet, and they both say Realtek on it. So who knows why they say that? And it says I have one Linksys over here. So I've got it set up as green, red, blue, and orange. And you can set your cards any way you want, but to get your system configured the rest of the way, I mean, you got to do some more steps in this setup system here. But to actually get everything to function on your network, you have to use the web browser to do that. So let me get going and setting up the rest of the system. I'm ready to click done here. So now the green network card is .1, but I'm going to use .254. Hit enter. And then the red is going to be let's see here. Alright, so this is my static IP address for the getting the internet on my router. So I'm going to hit OK. Now here you have to basically set up your DNS and gateway to your router, modem, whatever it is that you have. You can skip it if you like, but I usually like to just set it up prior to getting everything going. So So now double check your entries before clicking on OK. Make sure that you're all set, because I don't think you can change this once you're in there. I'm sure, because I've done this so many times. So my entries look perfect, and I'm ready to continue. Now, your blue network can be for your Wi-Fi network, or it can be for a full router. And what I mean by a full router is that it can fool another router to have network, or have internet, or network for that matter. You can actually, set it up so that you can go from, whether it's just internet or whether you want actually full-blown networking. By default, I think it's just internet. So you can give it whatever IP address you want, except that you don't want it the same IP address as your master network. So I'm just going to make up a couple of numbers here. So my blue network is going to be 192.20.21.254. I'm going to hit OK. And then my orange can be so now once you got that all set up, you're going to have to do your passwords. You can set up DHCP here if you want. You can click enabled. By default it's not. I don't need to. I can just go down to skip. So now you need to type in a password, and I think you got to do this about 5 times. You can change your password differently, whatever you want, but I usually just set all one password for everything. So now we're all done with that password setup, and you just hit OK, and then the system's just going to reboot, and then we'll be able to get online. So the thing that you need to do is to set up your computer, whether it's Windows XP, Windows Vista, Windows 7, 8, or 10. You need to set a static IP address of 192.168.1.1, and then you can gain access to your router. So let me go upstairs and we'll configure it the rest of the way. So now you have to do the same thing as you did on the Zero Shell. You have to add exception, which is what you normally have to do with Secure. And it's time to type in your password. So now to gain access to your router, you need to have your address as follows. Now each router is going to be different, but you need to type in https://192.168.1.254 then :8443 to get access to your router. Now it's different with every system setup. Depends on if you want to use a default address or if you're going to customize addresses. Now, the first thing I do once I get my router running is I shut down all the updates. So I just go to System, then I look for updates, and it's right here. I just decheck where it says check for updates after IPCOP connects. Then I hit save. Now I'm going to get you through the basic setup of getting your IPCOP online. So one of the things that I do is, if you want, this is a filter system. So if you want to filter things that you don't want on your network, either from your kids or if you have a business, you have an open Wi-Fi like I do, I filter the network so that they cannot get on certain things. So how you would set that up. Now, this took me forever to do with reading the red tape and everything else. So I'm going to quickly go through, show you what you need to do, and skip the red tape, and you'll be up and running in no time. So what you need to do is go up to Services here on your screen and go to Proxy. And I'm going to get there now, and by default it's off. And what you need to do is you need to enable it on the green and the blue. So I'm going to go here kind of fast and I'll recap what I've just done. So what I did is I enabled it. Now yes, it still says stopped, but I also over here on the right hand side have enabled the transparency on both the green and the blue. Now to make this work, you need to scroll down to the end of the page. You don't need all the rest of this stuff except for the redirectors. Now let's see here if I can get it up here for you. Right there where my mouse is, you need to check that and then come down to the right hand side of the screen and then click Save. And then once that's up and running, then you can go to your URL filter. So now you can check it and it's running. Everything's fine. And I would not change anything except enabling the redirector. Wouldn't change the 5 number unless you are more advanced. I don't understand too much about it. I just got things going and just left it as is. So the next thing you need to do to get yourself up and running is to click on the URL filter. So you got to go back up to Services and click on the next one is URL filter. Now by default, like you can see, it's off. So what I do is I enable everything. I enable the log and split by categories. Let's see here. So I'm going to scroll down to the next thing. So right here is what I am looking at to enable. Now I've got this router already running, so everything I've got is set up and it's ready to go. This is just my test system. So I'm going to enable all these to filter things. And if I had internet on this system, which I don't, I could download a database. Let's see. No, I don't want this one. I want that one. So I don't want to use DNS error block URLs. I've never used that. So the next thing I do is advanced options would be to let's see here. I don't really go for this one over here, but for the right side of the screen, I want these. I want to enable safe search, block ads with empty windows, and I want to customize ban clients. And I'm going to click and save and restart. Now, if you hit save, it's not really going to enforce your settings. You need to always click the restart, save and restart button down here. So, to get a filter, a block list set up, you need to click this box right here and then hit save. If you do everything the way I say I'm doing it, you'll be up in no time. You won't have to horse around like I did for months trying to get this thing to work. Now, I click the instant update button, and then that will bring up, if I had internet, it would have a list of you know, things to block. Now I'm going to go switch over to my other router that is running and show you my filter. So right here, you see I've got things, checked. I want to block on my network. So that will stop it. Now, like I said before in other movies, that this is basically just a band-aid. It doesn't stop everything. I mean, you would basically have to check everything and then pre-approve it before it goes through your network, which is kind of a pain in the neck. But I enable the ones that are most needful for me. And so this is not going to go anywhere. I'm back over to the test router again. And I want to enable the DHCP server. So I go back up to services, click on DHCP server, and let's see here. So by default, now unless you enable green in the setup, it would be running now. But I did not, because I don't need it. But for the blue, I do. So I want to come down here to the blue, and I'm going to copy this address. Now, why do I want to copy that? Because it saves me time from having to, type it all in. So all I have to do is just delete it and put a 1 in there. And then I want to go over to the end address, which is on the right hand side here, and just right click. So what I want to do here is I don't want to have 254. I want to only have 253. You don't want this. You don't want any computer riding on your router. That would not work. Now all I have to do is there's a primary DNS. This is network time protocol. I'll enable that. And there's a secondary DNS. Now you don't have to fill this in, but I do, just so that I don't have to go back through and fill it in. Now the secondary DNS is if you have another DNS provider, you can use that. A DNS would be, something like another router on your network, or something on the internet for that matter. So now this is enabled, and you can see that it's running. Now, let's see here. I want to. You can do other things. Which I'm not going to go in through. There's dynamic DNS. There's edit host. There's time server. I do enable time server. Not needful for setting it up, but if you want to do, set your clocks on your computers or the router, you can use this system. I'm not sure why it's not coming on, but it doesn't really matter. Let's see. Let's hit save again, and there. Well, okay. So now you need to click. These two check boxes need to be running to have the time protocol, the network time protocol set up. And now that's working. Now what I want to do next is go over to the firewall. Now by default, your Blue network is not going to have any internet. I don't know why, but it just doesn't. Now, some of the things that I'm going to show you first is there is a admin network. I use green. And I really don't use the green for anything else but management. I don't even use it for networking. I just use it for just getting on there and checking things. So when things go awry, that things aren't working right, I can actually do a test and see if I'm actually getting internet from that side of the network. And so I always leave the Blue admin network off just to keep people off my router. Anyways, I want to let's see here. Right here down at the bottom of the screen, it says address filter. You want that off. That's why you have no internet, and that's what was causing me to have a problem with my router that I was setting up, or my Wi-Fi. I had a Wi-Fi set up on that too as well. So for most basic users, that's all you need. Now for advanced users, if you want to do like servers and different things like that, that's a whole nother thing. Now I'm going to go through that just for those that are interested in setting up servers and other applications on their router. So all you need really on this, so what I did is I went to firewall, and then I went to firewall rules. I want to make sure that I show you this so you right know where to go. And it's kind of in the gray right now where my mouse is. And all you need to have on your router is you need outgoing traffic and port forwarding. The rest of them, leave it alone. You don't need it. So all you need to do is just click that, and then you just set up your services. And let's see here. I have some help screenshots because I can't remember what I did the last time. Okay, so I'm going to start with the outgoing here. Let me get back here. So your source should be green, and use source port. So like say you want a web server. You want to enable this, so it's already enabled by default. You want to select, now these are, I don't understand what all these things are, but these are different ports on your router. You can change them in your application, whether it's like a computer or what have you. The simplest way to find it is just to hit the H button on your keyboard. Keep going down to, let's see here. I want 80. So right there is port 80. And then you just leave pretty much everything else alone for that. And then you just make a name. So like just say I don't know, server 1. So there I got server 1 and I hit save. So now it goes back to the your page here to show you what you've done. Now you want to go to port forwarding. And then you want to, let me get onto something here. So now I got to go to my port forward rules. If you want to know what I'm doing, I got help snapshots on my computer from when I previously set it up, so if I ever needed to get back to it, I know what works. And I do recommend you making snapshots of your own setup, so that you know what the heck you're doing if you ever need to reset it up, or you're trying to configure something else. So what you want to do now is, if it's seeable, I hope it's legible on your screen. That's why I'm kind of reading it to you. So what you want to do is set your services again to HTTP. Now this could be anything that you wanted. Like I said, it could be a server, it could be what have you. There you go. There's HTTP. Now on the interface destination, or internal destination, excuse me, I read it wrong. You can choose your network, whether you want blue, green, or orange. I always use orange for my server network. Now you can just put your IP address in. It could be whatever. So just say your server is, I made up a phony baloney IP address for this network because I'm not really using it, but you want to type in your server address, whatever that may be. It could be a phone, it could be a web server, it could be what have you, and it could be just another computer. You just want to have other applications running on that you don't want on other computers. So then you want to go down to your default services, and you want to go through the same thing again, that you want HTTP, blah, HTTP. So alright, whoops, okay. So there, I've got it all set up, and then you don't even have to put a name in here, but if you want to keep track, I recommend it. So I just named it server 2, and then I just hit save. So now you can look back at your rules that you've got. This is your summary, and it tells you what you got going on your network. And if you want to do further customization, like right now, my tab says, right up here, it says IPCOP Firewall, which I can change that. So I recommend bookmarking this so you don't have to try to remember all your IP addresses. So what I did is went to the graphical user interface. That's GUI in the menu. So that's what that stands for, is graphical user interface. Let me show you that. Right there, highlighted in gray. So now I can display the host name and title, and then I click save right here on the right hand side, and now it says test router up on the tab, so I know what router I'm using. Now if you want to do something even more well, I don't know if I want to say advanced, but just you want to keep track of your traffic. Let's see here. Whoops. Well, these are actually traffic graphs. You can do that, but that's not what I was looking for. I was looking for traffic. Oh, where is it? Well, I'm going through some of these other things here that you don't really need. I mean, this just gives you the IP addresses of your network. So you can actually see if there's any errors or anything like that. That's not what I'm looking for. Let's see here. I want traffic accounting. So I want to go to the traffic accounting button over here on the right hand side to customize the page that I want. So now I can customize a bunch of different things. I can enable it. I can display traffic on home page. I can set rules, like if I have, I don't know, like if you have a certain amount of bandwidth you want to use, you can measure different amounts of bandwidth, whether it's coming in or going out. So like, say that your limit is, what, I don't know, 6 megabits, 1,000. You could just do 1,000. And you could input monitor input. You do 6. Let's see here, 6 1. And then monitor volume output, which what that might ever be. That could be 3,000. Well, I'm just making up numbers. I'm not exactly getting it right on the dot, but you can see what I mean by what I'm going to do here. So I've got everything put in the boxes here, what I want to monitor. And then I can go to my system home page and then monitor what has been going on for my network, for my, especially my internet connection. So if there was internet, you would be seeing a lot of different numbers here and graphs. So that's basically how you set this whole thing up, so you have internet and you can keep track of different things. I can go to the log settings and things like that, URL filter logs, and I can keep track of what's been blocked, the IP address of the client, whether it's a router or a PC or if it's a Mac. This actually helps you to speed up. Now the router in general here helps you to speed up your network, because, especially your internet, because you're not downloading the cookies, all the ads, the other junk that they got on there. Like I said, it's not a perfect thing, but it's better than nothing. And that's basically how you get your system up and running. And there's further customization, but I basically just wanted to show you what I was doing with the IP cop. But now I'm going to show you how to set up the smooth wall, which the smooth wall is basically just the same, almost the same setup as the IP cop. But with the IP cop, if something happened that you had to reinstall it, you basically have to put another disk in and format the hard drive so you destroy the IP cop. But hopefully that doesn't happen. But if you have a hard drive failure, you can use a lot of other things with this router, like a flash drive. Don't really recommend flash drives because they're not meant for permanent use. I've had those fail a lot. But let me get down there now and show you what I'm doing with the smooth wall. So now I've got my smooth wall router CD in, and I'm ready to boot to that now. And you just basically do it like you installed your IP cop, or Zero Shell for that matter. And so it wants to start this from the CD. Just click OK, and it'll start loading in. Okay, so now smooth wall basically looks the same as IP cop does. The only difference is that you can see that it says Smooth Wall Express 3.1, and so that's how you can tell that I'm not just reinstalling IP cop all over again, Now it's going to, well, it's saying installation program will now prepare the hard drive and on device SATA, blah blah blah, partition and partition will have a file system put on them, which is basically, if you're installing something, why wouldn't they have it, you know? Anyhow, it's just telling you, giving you a warning that it's going to permanently destroy the thing. And now this is going to install the Smoothwall. Now, the one thing I like about Smoothwall is the fact that it's reinstallable friendly. And what I mean by that is, if it crashes or it does something weird, you can always reinstall it. Now, I'm not saying that everything is going to crash, but sometimes you might have a network failure, like a network card, die on you. You can have a hard drive failure. Who knows what? RAM problem. You can always reinstall it without having to delete what's on it first, which is very nice, and I find that even better than the IP cop. But I'm going to just get this thing set up and running for you. It's basically like the other IP cop setup, but it's just a few things are different than IP cop. I mean, there's a few other extra settings that you have to do that Smoothwall doesn't have to do. Okay, now your Smoothwall Express is installed. Now, on this particular unit, or operating system, whatever you want to say, you can access it through its IP address. It's still HTTPS, but then you have to put :81, or you can use HTTP. I forgot to even mention that. So you can use either or. But then the HTTP, which is the normal way that we look at websites, is just 81. And the HTTPS is 441. So when we get going into the web browser, I'm just going to use the standard HTTP and use the :81. So I'm going to, let's see here, do I want to restore it? No, don't have any backup. Now, this one by default is UK, so I want to go to US, click OK, and then again, I'm going to have to select my time zone in the US. Let's see here. Well, this one doesn't want to, I have to select it manually. I just can't hit the U button for US and select each time frame. So now you can customize it. I can say, oh, let's see here. Router main, which means that's the main router. Now, here's one that the IP cop did not have. Now, the one thing I would leave alone is the half open, which is what they have highlighted by default. I've tried the closed and I've tried the open, and I've never gotten those other two to work, so I have no clue what's going on with them. Now, maybe it's something that I did wrong, I don't know, but this is really the first time I've used it. But it's a basic setup like IP cop, but I would only use the half open, which is what I recommend, because that's the only way I could get it to work. So now you select your network cards like you did on the other system, and there's a bunch of them, and you're like, well, what do I pick? Well, it depends on what you want. Now, let's see here. There's a selection where it says green, red is modem IDSN. I really don't understand what all that means, except that it would not work with your router. Now you can choose whether it be green, orange, red. You would have to pick the one that does not have the modem IDSN selection. So it would be something like this: green, orange, red. Now I want the last selection, which is green, purple, orange, and red. That's my setup. And I want to assignment the cards, And let's see here. So I'm just going to go down through. I'm not even going to say which card I want. I'm just going to randomly just click everything and be done with it. There. Now I'm all done. I can set my DNS. Let's see here. Address settings. Green. Okay. So this one by default is 0. I'm going to do .1.254 like the other one. I recommend setting up your addresses before you finish the installation. I mean, well, it's already finished, but you're customizing it. Purple. Alright. Now I can make a static red address, or I can make DHCP server. And I'm going to use static. Come on. So I made it 192.20.30.2. Now I can click done. DNS would be the same as like IPCOP. Now you want to double check your entry and all your entries and make sure that they're right. Which with this router it doesn't matter because you can always change it later in the graphical user interface on the web browser on your workstation PC or Mac. So I don't have to worry about messing something up. I can just hit OK. Then I'm hit done. Then I can go to the DHCP server. I can enable this if I want, but I don't need to, because I can always make up my mind later when I want to do it inside my computer. So I don't need to do this. I can just skip it. Let's see here. So now I can hit, let's see here. Okay. This one I don't really need. Just was checking it out. I never been in this one before, so I wanted to actually see this. Whoops. I don't want that. Let's see here. Alright. So you can do a bunch of things in here, but I don't need to. Now it's back to the password again. So I got to configure the password, and then I can log in. So now that's complete, and I can hit OK, and the system will reboot. So then I can go over to my computer and configure all that after that. Now, once this thing is booted, there's no reason to have your monitor or your keyboard even attached to the thing. It'll just run. And I mean, with this one, Zero Shell was different. You could configure Zero Shell with your keyboard and your monitor. But this one, it's all on the internet. Or it's not the internet, but it's all done through the web page. All through the IP address. So it goes through its standard little beeps like the IPCOP does. So now it's ready to look at it on the computer. Now, like I said, you gotta set your computer with a static IP address if you don't have the DHCP server enabled. Now, it's the same way with your IPCOP. you need to label the cards because you'll never remember which one goes where if you unplug it and move it someplace else. So it's always best to have your cards labeled and just stick it someplace on the computer where you'd be able to see it. So let's get to the computer now and see what it does. Here is your home page of your smooth wall. Now to configure your smooth wall, you need to come up here and click on whether it's networking or services. So let's get started with the services. So basically everything by default is off. So you gotta turn everything on to get it working. Now this is a filter router just like the IP cop. Now there are some things that I don't like about this operating system compared to the IP cop, but it's like, for one, it takes forever for the page to load once you get in here. And the first thing, you'll see this when I start loading pages of how long it takes. Now it's not too bad, but the IP cop is a lot faster. So the first thing I'm going to click on is the web proxy, and we're going to enable that to get the URL to work, URL filter. Now, like I said before, these are just test systems, and there's no internet to this router, so you can't download any blocking databases. Now, it's just sitting up there turning. Okay, so now I don't really mess with too much of anything else except that I just enable. Now let me get up close if you can't see it. So these boxes are not lit or to have a green check mark in it. So now I just go down through and check mark it so that they're enabled, and then I say I'm going to use the save and clear cache or how you say it, or you can use save, but I'm just going to go with this one. But normally I just use save. Now the nice thing about Smooth Wall is that they give you little tabs up at the top, so you can click on your ones that you want to configure, which the IP cop doesn't allow you to do that. You have to go up to the main menu up here all the time just to check which one you want to get to. Which Smooth Wall, I don't have to do that. Now I can just click on the URL filter and enable that. And like I said, it's kind of like IP cop, but just a little bit different. But basically the settings are the same. The things I can tell you about this firewall versus IP cop is that it's a lot easier to configure the firewall than IP cop is. So now when it's finally open, it shows you a little box here of everything's off, and you need to enable that. And then let's see here. Scroll down the page here. So you got different things you can go and get into, like custom whitelists, basically like what IP cop is doing. And I've done some research on it, and I've found that one of these, and I can't remember now because I've done it a while ago, but it's either IP cop or Smooth Wall. One of them is a copy of one of the other. I don't remember which one it is, but you can look it up on the internet of what program is off from whose. So what I want to do is, just like I did before, is to checkbox all of these that I want. Now, so like I want ads blocked, aggressive, well, not audio and video. I want to have that so I can do streaming. But like drugs, gambling, hacking, mail. Well, we don't need to block mail, but want to block porn. And then there's some other, I don't know what they are, but anyways, there's the selection. And then you gotta come down here to save and restart. So let me get up there so you can see it. So that's your your save and restart button, and then that will put all your settings in. And we need to do some other enabling before everything gets going. And like I said, this is basically kind of like IP-COP, but it's a little bit laid out differently. And the one thing I don't really like about the smooth wall, especially like for quality of service, which that means QoS, which is like I described before, that if you set your router that you want 6 megs down and 1 up, you can do it. But this one does it in bits. I don't care for that. So you can enable these custom blacklists if you want. Don't need to. So you can tell it, you don't want to, you want to block executable files, that's EXEs, block audio and video files. You can do a bunch of other things, and I don't really need that. But now here on the block page, where these settings are, I want to show the URL on block page. IP address. I'm not going to use this, but that's up to you if you want to use it. And then you can put a little message on your block page. Oops. There, so you can make it say sorry, and then when something gets blocked, it'll come up with that sorry. So down here in the advanced settings, let me scroll up here. You can enable other things too. Let me get a little bit closer here. I'm not sure if I really need these, but you can enable them. And this is just going to be trial and error for most of you folks that have never run one of these before. And let's see here. Oh yeah, here's one I want to do, the safe search. So that's basically like IP-COP. It's just a little bit different than as far as how it's laid out. I don't really going to enable this one. That's block sites accessed by their IP address. I'm going to come over to the right, and I'm going to enable the log username and split category. And then I also will enable the allow custom whitelists. Then I'll click save and start again and restart. So while that's doing its thing, let's see here. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do once we get that, once it's done loading its thing, we'll have to enable the automatic blacklist update. And that will download when you have internet to your system. So now it's basically, updated, and the settings are all set. So now we can come down here and just click that and save update settings. So that's what you want to click on right there. So you want to have a green checkbox in it and tell it save and update settings. So then, if there was internet on this machine, you come over here and just click update now, and when it's done, it just kind of refreshes back to the top. So that's basically how you get your filtering set up. Now, like I said, like on IP-COP, once you get your list downloaded, I always shut this off so it cannot update unless I tell it to. So the next thing you want to go to is, well, this is not really necessary, but I haven't really found out what it is. It's just IM proxy. I basically just go through and enable everything. I mean, that's just, I don't know what it does, but if it gave me a problem, I just go back and shut it off. And you can see how long it's taking to load this page. Okay. So, I guess IM proxy is just instant message. I don't know if that's just for software or if it's like Facebook or different things like that. That's the only thing that I've found that these routers do not do, is they do not block HTTPS, which means Hypertext Protocol Safety. I can't remember what the S stands for, but you can look it up online what the HTTPS means. But that's a secure, protocol, and that's like if it was just a normal protocol, which is just Hypertext Transfer Protocol, that you can block easier than secure. Well, it looks like it's going to take all day to do its thing here. Okay. Now you can do, let's see here, POP3 Proxy. Now, what POP3 means, to those that are new to routing and different things like that, it means Post Office Protocol, and I don't know what the 3 is for, but that's where your mail comes from. And I don't think you really need to do too much with this, but like I said, I just go through and just take a quick glance at it. Now you can enable it. Like I said, I'm going to enable everything. And then hit save once again. At least this time you don't have to hit save and restart. Well, I don't know why it says unable to run command, but anyways, I don't think I need it. So you can go to SIP proxy, and I really don't. I don't think I use a lot of these things, but some of it I think has to do because there is no internet on this system. I mean, it's just a trial and error thing just to actually just show you what's inside of each router. Now I use, like I said, I use IPCOP, and I've used this one. So now I can enable transparency. So I've got these all enabled now, and I'll hit save. Now, once you get your initial operating system installed, I think it might take about a half hour to get this all configured, or maybe an hour. I don't know. It shouldn't be that long. I know that the IPCOP was a lot quicker, but then it was also in some ways a little bit harder to get everything running versus this one. And I just don't know. I mean, I don't know which one you want to go with, but I'm just showing you everything that's in these routers. And like I've said, I like this one because it also has a help file. So you can come up here to the right-hand corner of the screen, and you can click on help. And this help file that they've got here actually does help. I mean, it's not like some useless help files that they've got, which doesn't do a damn thing for you. So I can come over to DHCP now and configure, for whatever interface I want to get it onto, whether it be my green interface or my purple interface. And this would be basically just like IPCOP again, but it's just a little bit laid out a little bit differently. So let me show you what I mean by it's laid out a little bit differently. So here you gotta select which interface you want to enable. Which IPCOP, it just had both of them laid out. So if I want to select purple, then I have to click that select button and wait for it to finally get done loading, and then set my DHCP server. Now, I can't remember what DHCP means, but it's Dynamic Host Protocol System or something like that. Basically, it just means that DHCP is when your computer comes online and your computer is looking for an IP address, it will grab an IP address. Now, if it's set statically, it doesn't need to. Like mine is all set static. So here again, now this one, let's see here. I want to enable it, so you check that box. Now this one doesn't allow you to see what interface, like what your IP addresses are. Now I do know what my IP address is, so I can just set that in the address bar. So right there's my IP address that I've just set. It's 192.40.40.1. And then I just go over and just copy it. And come over here to the right hand side of the screen. Now this one you don't want 1 in. You want 253. Now why do I say that? Is because the router is .254 and you don't want it some IP address getting onto your router. That will cause a whole heap of problems. So what I would do is just copy that address, and then for the primary DNS, hit Control V, and then I'm going to delete that and make a 4. Now I'm not sure that you really need to put a DNS in here, but I just do just to be on the safe side. I mean, you can use any DNS that you want. And I'll go into DNS and further videos of what that really means and why you need them. So I'm just going to paste everything here. I leave the other things by default settings. Let's see. So there's some other things here that I could do. I'm really not going to fill those in, but I've got everything else labeled out here. Just to run, and I'm just going to click save, and then that will be enabled. Now there's some other options here that I'm not going to go through because I don't need them, and I really have never set them up myself, so I'm not even going to waste your time viewing those other settings. But those are some other settings that you can look at. One thing I would click on to see if all your settings are successful is go to About, and then let me get up there so I can highlight it for you. So you want status, or status, however, it's a tongue twister. Anyhow, click on status, and then it will show you your system state. And then you can see if there's other things that you want to enable or not. So here in the green, it shows me what's going on as far as what's enabled and not enabled on my router. Now some of these I still need to enable, like if you want a QoS or anything else. But like the one thing I do recommend enabling is the UPnP and down here in services. Now you gotta go, and I gotta go find that because I don't remember where it's located. I've set other routers and it was a lot easier to find it. But let's see if we click in advanced and see if we can find any settings there. Now advanced tab, it's basically just showing you like system resources, how much is being used, disk usage, stuff that doesn't really mean too much to me. I mean, maybe to some of you folks it would, but I don't care. I mean, especially when it says stuff like this, like buffer, it says 4 something K. I'm like, I don't care. I don't know what that is. I don't know if that's kilobytes or what that is. So you can go to traffic graphs and look at other status of your system. Those are helpful to find out what's going in on, coming in and going out of your router. Well, in some ways, it doesn't really help me out. I mean, it tells me that but I was thinking that there would be actually a graphical user interface where it show you like bars and different things, but it just reads it in stuff like kilobits and bits, and I understand what kilobytes are, but to me, I don't understand what a bit is. I mean, I byte something and that's about it. Or I bit something, But anyways, let's move on so it doesn't drag too much. Okay, so we got mainly all these things set up here. So if you want to go to, let's see here, maintenance. Now you can just click on maintenance tab and it will bring up, you don't even have to click on the drop down menus if you don't want. And then it will bring up different things of maintenance. And in here you can change your password and different things like that, which one thing's kind of a bust on these routers is that they don't allow you to change your username. But they should. So it basically, yeah. So now here it's giving you updates, and then there's modems, speed touch, USB firmware, passwords, backup, preferences. All these different options here. And let's see here with preferences. A lot of this other stuff doesn't mean a dilly squat to me. And what I need to do with my router. So basically it just gives you a option whether you want to use drop down menus and always use English. Those, I wouldn't change those unless you speak other languages. So let's go to network. So we're going to do networking, and we're actually going to look at the firewall. And just click. I mean, you can just, like I said before, you can click on network, and then it will just bring up a whole slew of tabs that you can check each one. And unless you want a certain one, like incoming, outgoing, internal, external, I wouldn't even mess with remote accessing the router from another internet connection. So here I can set my ports. Now this one, let's see here. Well, it doesn't give you like the color. Well, you have to just set your network destination basically. Like I said, this one's a little bit easier than IPCOP, but then if you've been using IPCOP for a while and you wanted something new, or you just wanted to test this one out, this one's easy, but then sometimes it's not. But really, all you need to do is, they don't give you really, like some routers, they'll just say port forwarding, this and that and the other thing. This thing just says incoming, outgoing, internal, external access, IP block, timed access, QoS, advanced, PPP, interfaces. And interfaces are basically what that's talking about is your network card. Whether it's red, green, purple, orange. So let's see here. I'm going to click on outgoing, so like that's your server. And it's just like IPCOP. Just set your rules and away you go. But like I said, IPCOP is a little bit more difficult to set up than this. Okay, so here it's giving you your ports, your card interfaces. So you can actually set whether you want green, purple, or orange. So if you're looking for your server, you can just add that port right here. And then you can make a comment. So I got, let's see here. So I got port 80. And I just labeled it test and just click add. So then here's your new rule. set up and ready to go. So it's enabled, and you can disable any one of these if you want. If you just go to edit, which I'm not going to take the time to do that. I'm just going to show you the basic setup process here. And then you got internal. I don't think we really need to mess with this. Like I said, it's different when you're looking at this. You're kind of like, well, what's port forwarding? And you just gotta read the help documentation that's there. So what you want to do now is, well, this is probably not. I'm not sure if this is what exactly we need. But you set your source IP, your destination. Now, the one thing that I have found out with this firewall is that you don't have to set your source IP or network. All you need to do is set your destination, IP address. So that would be the IP address of your router or your server or what it is that you want to, forward or get outside your firewall. And that way, everything, just read the help. The help section up here. This will actually, I've used it. I've used it at Help tab, and it was very easy to do. And I understood it, quite, simply. But just by looking at this without going and doing a whole bunch of stuff, I'm not going to set it up for a router. I'm just using this for like a display unit. So you can do external access, IP block, timed access. So we're going to see what the external access is. So here you can do some other things with your firewall. You really don't need this for if you're going to run servers on your network, or if you got certain applications that you want to get outside your firewall. But if you need it, this is a place where you can start doing some things. So here's the, to me, I'm not really interested in the IP block, but just let's take a look at it. I haven't really gone in there, even with, in the past doing stuff with it, so I don't remember what's in there. So here's basically where you can put an IP address in, and then you can choose whether you want to drop packets or reject packet. And then you can also log it in. You can enable it or disable it. And then your time access is basically like what most routers have, where you can specify certain things to actually have internet or not. And I don't need it because I'm just using this as a filtering system. I use other routers to use the time access if I needed it, but I don't. Maybe that's all you want is just one router. Like I said, I'm using multiple things. So here, which I find this kind of annoying, is the fact that they have Army time in 24 hours. So it's a 24-hour digits. If you're not used to Army time, you can always look it up on the internet trying to figure out. 24 hours is 12 o'clock a.m. But the way I kind of, sometimes when I'm doing a afternoon, I have to start counting, up and doing it on my fingers, and like 12, 1 is 13, I can't really show you all on the video camera here with my fingers, but so I just start counting, and even sometimes draw out a little table on on a piece of paper of the clock of 12 hours versus 24 hours, so I can figure out what time I'm trying to look at. So then you can just drop down this box and you say, oh, I want, let's see here, 2 o'clock. And then you want, so it would be 1400 hours. Then you click Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. But I don't need that. The QoS I usually enable just to have, I don't really know if it does me any good or not, because I have other applications that are using the QoS on another router. So I'll show you what what's in here, and that's pretty much all you really need to do to get your router running. And so here's the problem that I have is, as I read it, it says bits per second. Now I don't know what that number is. I know what kilobits is, and then you can specify different things. So I can enable it. I don't remember what my number was that I had, but it was huge. It was even more than what they have here. So I can just click save, and then the QoS is running. And I just left it by default. And there's one thing that's in here that I didn't tell you about, is that there's a virus scanner, which is nice. But I think that that's an add-on. So you would have to look that up on the internet. I do have the file, but I don't know if it did anything really to help me out. I just don't know. Okay, so if you go to Advanced, this is where you can set different things. So you can set the IC MP ping. I really don't know what that is. Blocking or IGMP. That's enabled by default. And then here's your UPnP, Universal Plug and Play support. That one I enable. Probably don't need it, but I do anyways, just because everything else is enabled. So that's basically what you really need to do to get your router up and running. I can't really do too much because I don't have the internet on this system, but my main network does, so I'm all set there. So let's try the PPP, and I don't think that's much of anything. Maybe some of you folks that are more advanced know about some of this stuff. I just set it up and just get it going. That's all I do. Okay, so here is the PPP. This really wouldn't be any use to any of you unless you have a dial-up modem. Now, who in the world has a dial-up modem? I sure don't. So this really doesn't need to be monkeyed with. I'd skip it. So the thing that I would look at next is the interfaces right up here on the last box that you can click on. So over here, so here's your interfaces. I have to scroll down to show you the more. But so right here, you can actually set or change your networking, your IP addresses here in for your router, which is nice, which IPCOP does not allow you to do. So you can also, if you have another router, or if you decide you want to use a different route, or if you want to, I don't know, like PPoE, or if you got like a regular DSL or cable modem, you can even set the PPoE up to run, which is helpful. Which, like I said, with IPCOP, once you set it, you forget it. You can't change it unless you want to reinstall it. So this is your let's see, your red interface, and that I can change anytime. Any of these interfaces. So that's nice, but when you change your interface, you're going to have to remember what your IP address is, because if you get yourself locked out, there's no reset button. The only reset button that you've got is to reinstall the whole thing. That's the only way you can flush anything out that you did. And then I would back it up first before you start doing anything. And that's what I do on every machine, is I back everything up. So over here, and I'm not going to go into it, but if you want to look at it, let's see here. There's VPN, virtual private networking. I've never used it. Don't care. I don't even know what. I don't know. I mean, that's up to you folks, what you want to do. So then you can look at your logs and see the URL filter. And like right now, there wouldn't be anything because there's no internet and nobody's looking at anything on the internet. So there wouldn't be much to report. So right here, yeah, there's nothing because there's nothing been looked at. So that's basically all you need to do to get your firewall up and running. You can actually look at the logs of anything that you want, but you're not going to see anything here because there's, like I said, there is nothing. Well, okay, so the firewall does have some logs, and then it gives you the interfaces of different things, whether it's Ethernet 1 or 0 or 2 or 3. Basically everything is on Ethernet 1. I'm not sure what you can do with it. Never really cared. Let's see, let's look it up. We can click on one and then look it up and see what it does. Never really needed it really, but then you can go to the if you see something suspicious, you can just add to the block list. So that's handy. If you find something suspicious in your network, you can just get rid of it pretty easily. Well, it says reverse lookup failed, so I'm not sure what it does, but that's mainly what you can do with this router. There's other things like the IP information, which IPCOP does not have. I mean, if it does have it, I haven't found it. So, and it doesn't allow you to block the IP address like the Smoothwall does. So there are some things that I like about it. So I hope that helps you to decide what router you want to use in your network. I do recommend the different routers like Zero Shell. That is very flexible, and I didn't really get into an awful lot of detail of how to set that up because that's going to be more than what you folks really need. I mean, unless you really need to set something up like that, there's other videos I've done on YouTube that go into more of a depth of what that router will do. Now, I probably don't list off the name of routers that I'm using. I don't know. I don't remember. But anyhow, I just use whatever router works for you, whether it's Smoothwall or it's IPCOP. Now, like I said, I do like the Smoothwall better because it's more customizable than the IPCOP. And the IPCOP has some more hoops you got to jump through than Smoothwall. But it just depends on if you don't think you're ever going to change your network or reconfigure it, then use IPCOP. But the IPCOP doesn't really have help files like Smoothwall. So if you need help, you're screwed. You just don't have any help. But with Smoothwall, there's a help file, and I've found it helpful, and it does work. So just download it and put it to a disk and try it for yourself. And I'll see you the next time on Pushing Technology to the Limit. Have a wonderful day.